Okay. So, what is one of your favorite aspects of God's character and why?
I think it's his dependability or faithfulness. I always thank God for his goodness, actually. And it's because it seems like in all circumstances, he comes through in a good way, always balanced, always in love, never oddball kind of God or overly demanding, but just a great God that just is so faithful, dependent. So I say probably I thank God more for his goodness than for any other trait or characteristic of him.
Yeah. Tell me about how you came to date and marry your wife.
Well, actually, that goes back a long ways. I was in the third grade and received an invitation from one of my classmates to his birthday party. And I thought I was moving up in class a little bit because they had a little more money than what my folks had. And so I took him up on going to the party, and I discovered he had a sister that was in the first grade. Mind you, in the first grade. And I thought she was cute. And I said, I'm going to keep my eyes on her. Well, I didn't make a move until I was a senior in high school, believe it or not.
Wow.
But I helped her to a dance, and in helping her, I said, hey, she's gotten cute, and now it's probably time for me to make a move. She was now a sophomore in high school, and I was a senior. And so I started dating her, and that didn't last very long because the Navy called me back. And then I got out of the Navy and started dating her seriously. And then we had a big breakup, and sorry to say, she was dating another guy that was a Golden Glove boxing champion.
Mm.
And I was told by her dear girlfriend that if I would ask her, she would go out with me again. Well, she was just across the dance floor from me. So I immediately walked across the dance floor, asked her to dance, and boy, the love was still there, I guess you'd call it. And about that time, her present boyfriend walked up to me and said, you want to step outside? So I said, yeah. So I stepped outside, and he said, what's the big idea dating my woman? And I said, I was dating her before you were out of diapers. And he didn't appreciate that statement very much. So he got angry, and instead I just grabbed him by the throat. Having been a wrestler, I knew I could take a boxer. So I grabbed him by the throat and started taking him down when guys that were observing, they grabbed us and stopped us. And I knew that guy very well, and I liked him, actually. But that was the start then of a serious romance with my gal, and I married her a year later, and we were married 63 years when she died.
Wow.
So
Yeah, the next few are kind of follow-ups on that. What's your favorite thing about her?
she had a wit that no one could compare, right, Jeremiah? she could put anybody in their place so fast and not do it in a harmful way. She would do it so that everybody would be laughing. Like I was in campus ministry, and she would catch me on something, and everybody would be laughing at my expense. Of course, all in good fun. But if I tried to answer her, I was always slow in coming back with a smart aleck statement. And people would say, too late, Hal, too late, you're too slow. And no one could match her. She was just, I heard her one day shut up a lawyer and a banker.
Wow.
And she just shut them both up. They couldn't even say a word. She just finalized it so much. And a theologian one day, I saw her, put him on the spot, and he never tried to catch her afterwards. So that was a trait that she had that was outstanding.
Wow. Yeah. What do you wish you had known or done before marriage?
I wish I had brought Christ into my life. I wasn't a Christian. I didn't have any Bible and didn't know anything that way. And I was just really a street person. I was raised on a pool table and made some money for spending on pool table. And so I ran the streets, got in trouble, and had no purpose in life, really. And so when somebody introduced me to Christ, I thought that sounded strange, so I had all kinds of questions. It took me 2 years of questioning before I really became a Christian. It changed my life, and we'd been just married a short time and was not favorably received by my wife at the time, because she had the background of me without the exposure to Christ like I had at work every day with a good Christian. And so she resented my becoming a Christian at first, until then the Navy called me back for the Korean War, and I got stationed in Atlantic City, New Jersey, of all places. So I brought my wife to be with me then. And while in Atlantic City, New Jersey, we started searching for a church, and we found a good one. And then my wife became a Christian like I was, and that changed our lives completely. So then after I got out of the Navy, I went to seminary.
Wow. Yeah. What are some practical ways that you led, cared for, and developed your wife and kids?
Well, I wasn't a good parent because I didn't have good parents. And I didn't know how to be a husband very well because my mom and dad were divorced when I was 11, and my siblings were all older than me. The next older one was 8 years older. So that by the time I got into junior high school, they were all gone. And so I lived with my stepmother and dad after my mother had died in the middle of the divorce. And I lived with her 2 years with a stepdad that I resented because he had taken my mom away from my dad. So I didn't really have a dad because he had only finished the 5th grade, or not finished the 5th grade, I should say, and his mother died. So he never went back to school. Instead, he went to riding the rods on trains, and he could drive anything that had wheels on it. And as a result, he was gone most of the time, so I ran the streets. So the way I raised my kids basically was in a military fashion. I expected them to do things for one reason, and that was because I told them to do it. And that's not the way to raise a family. And so I had some problems that way with my wife. We argued in the early days of our marriage because neither one of us knew much about real married life because my wife was from divorced parents too. So our life was designed almost to be a failure in marriage. But instead, Jesus Christ changed us, and my wife would be patient with me yelling at her, and I did it so often and didn't need to, that's for sure. And then she began to forgive me more, and I began to overlook her faults, and we started making sense of our marriage. But still, with the kids, it showed up because in campus ministry, I got so busy that my 2 younger kids didn't see much of me. And I let them down because of that. And so our kids kind of have picked up since that time and have seen the benefits of a Christian marriage, and they've all become Christians and have Christian marriages now and have wonderful lives. In fact, my son has 2 sons. I don't know how they got in our family, but both of them are chess champions in the state of Iowa. They're state champions every year. They've got so many trophies they don't know what to do with them all. And now the one has been teaching physics at the University of Iowa since he was a freshman in high school. Can you believe that? So that's just 2 of our grandkids, and we have others that have become dentists and others that have been valedictorians. And so it's been amazing how the kids turned out with their kids, but I sure failed my kids to start with.
What role have godly friends played in your life, and what advice would you give on friendships?
Well, I think the local church is key. I think a person needs to be a part of a good Bible believing church, and that's what I did right after I became a Christian. And I got advice from a lot of the Christians in the church, older men and women that had experiences similar to mine, but now they were different completely. And they advised me certain ways and helped me. And then on our own, we just made decisions that if my wife would say something crude to me, I developed a tactic that there's no way I was going to say something crude back, or vice versa. We just were going to get along and be good Christians and good parents. And so we do that with our kids too. But the last two kids I had were the ones we failed the most because I was gone too much in my busy campus ministry. So they for a while had trouble before they grew up and got to making sense out of life.
Yeah. What advice would you give about work?
Well, I maintain that a person should become a Christian. None of us is good enough to get through life in and of ourselves. We need other people, and I think we need God. And there's an illustration that you draw a triangle, and you indicate that God's the top of the triangle, and at the bottom of one part of the triangle is the wife, and the other side is the husband. And the more you draw closer to God, the closer you draw to each other. So then we used that with our kids the same way, and started spending more time with our kids. And I'd always been an athlete, so I could work out with my two boys, but I was weak with my girls, you might say. But they put up with my failures, and my wife put up with my failures and helped me to overcome some of those so that I could be a better dad. So I maintain you need to get in a good church then to support you so that that supports the family. And I never felt I was smart enough to raise my kids by myself, so I would get them in good Christian groups like summer camp, or Awana is a program that's held in a lot of local churches. And other people would help develop my kids in those classes. So I advise a person to get in a church where he can have some support in growing his family and his wife getting along with him, and teaching the kids better than what I had, for example.
What advice would you give on money?
Well, I've always been a little bit of a cheapskate because I never had anything as a kid. And as a result, I was always just trying to get a few cents in my pocket. Probably I needed more sense in my brain, but nonetheless, I had problems and didn't have anything, and I stole things as a kid. And then as I got older, I realized that wasn't the right lifestyle, and I got away from that, of course. But I still thought of myself as being a dummy, and therefore not capable of having a real good job, just probably when anything came along. But to the contrary, I discovered I had a good mind, and when I went in the military, I had real good grades. And I give all my credit to my teachers, not to myself, because I never took a book home until I got mumps one day in my sophomore year of high school. That was the only time I ever remember taking a book home. But I did listen in class, and I would read comic books, and went to a lot of movies. I was raised in a movie theater, you might say. And somehow some of that stuff got through. I developed vocabulary, things like that, although my English was absolutely terrible. And so anyhow, I started growing and started speaking proper English now as a Christian. I had to also. And a number of ways I discovered I was not as dumb as I thought I was. I just had to start studying some. So I started studying books as I had to counter arguments of religion. It's called apologetics, or defense of the faith. And I had to defend my faith all the time. So that made me think a lot and develop my vocabulary in more ways than one, and my thought processes especially. Then I became a preacher, and I had to study an unusual amount. And so that was training my mind, and I discovered I wasn't quite the dummy I thought I was. I just had to study a little bit.
Yeah. What advice would you give on, a walk with God?
Well, I absolutely had to get into the Bible every day. Some people have a motto, no Bible, no breakfast. Mine wasn't quite that good because I had to have breakfast soon after I got up. So I just stayed in bed and prayed, and then would eat, and then after I'd finished my breakfast, I would study my Bible some every day. And I've done that all my life now, so that I read my Bible at least twice a year. And that has helped me, and then I've developed a series of prayers and times of prayer, so that I pray quite a long time every morning. And then I've learned that I need to share my faith. That has helped me, and those three things particularly. And then discipline of avoiding certain practices and habits kept me out of trouble and kept me in a closer relationship with God so that He could bless me. And I watched Him as He blessed me, and now I'm not poor like I used to be, and God has blessed me in so many ways.
Yeah,
I've
awesome.
got 5 kids, and now I have 15 grandkids and 20 great-grandkids. So you can see that's a blessing.
Yeah. You've kind of mentioned it in the past questions, but what advice would you give on church?
Well, you want to find a church that's Bible-oriented so that you can investigate what the preacher is saying, and he most likely will be able to tell you why he said it if he's a Bible preacher, because he's had to study real hard for every sermon he preaches. And so I've learned that I can ask ministers good questions and even doubt these ministers and expect good answers from them. And then also in Sunday school classes, you hear somebody bring up a point or answer a point, and you get the answers to a lot of questions that way. And then there are good sermons from which you obtain a lot of information to help you grow in your faith. And so I've seen, there's been a time I had to leave the church I was growing up in because they didn't preach the Bible, and the minister couldn't answer my questions. So I found a church that was biblically based, and therefore I would get my answers from the Bible and defend the Bible and share my faith from the Bible and so forth.
Yeah. What advice would you give on ministry?
Well, as I've said, there's got to be a solution to living a victorious Christian life by getting in the Bible and praying and so forth. So in being a minister, you have to be ultra sound in those practices so that you're what you ought to be. You ought to be honest, for instance. Well, it's much easier being honest when you're in the Word of God, and God's Holy Spirit can minister to you and bother you when you're not being honest. And so you confess your sin and get on the right side of God. And when you're on the right side of God, you start helping others that have needs. And so you help others, and that in turn helps yourself. And so God honored me and blessed me as I honored Him and helped and blessed other people.
Okay, the last question. This is just, very open-ended. What do you wish you'd known or done at my age?
Well, I wish I'd have studied more. I had a theologian friend who's an absolute brain. He could come to the University of Colorado unannounced, and the teacher of philosophy department would automatically have him take his lectern, just right off the top. Wow. Now, mind you, a philosophy department, and he could walk in the class and start teaching it. That's how smart he was, and he was in my apologetics class in seminary. And I couldn't begin to attain the level that he did in his taking that class. But I later saw him on numerous occasions, and we were good friends. And he said, Hal, he said, you need to read more. And I said, Jim, you're right. I should be reading more than I am. But I said, my major has not been philosophy. My major is people. And I have been with people. In campus ministry, I was surrounded by people constantly. Ask this question, answer that question, and just have to be consistent in both life and in experience. And so I probably should have read more and in my lifetime, so that I would have had some more detailed experiences. But I spent so much time with people, I learned an awful lot that way.
Yeah. Well, that's the end of this, of my questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.